Hey-ya.
No, it goes, hey-o.
Hey. What's the guy on Howard Stern? Hit him with the high.
Hit him with the high.
You know, anybody that is not a fan of Howard Stern really should, what you should do if you're not a fan of Howard Stern is you should find one of your favorite actors or favorite singers or whatever and just listen to a long interview with Howard Stern and that individual. You will learn so much more about that person and their character and their true personality.
Well, and I'm a regular Howard Stern listener. I'm not an everyday listener. Used to be for a long time, but now I'm just kind of a regular where I pop in there, pop in, pop out a couple times a week.
Well, I love all the stuff that he's been dumping on YouTube.
Oh God, that's trouble though, because if you start watching that, especially if you have a couple beers, you might find yourself stuck to the couch and having been there for 3 hours or 4 hours because you fell down some Baba Booey rabbit hole, right. Or even John Hine.
Hit him with a high.
But the thing for me with Stern in his interviews, and I don't know if it's Stern is really good at it or it's the setting or that the famous person or whoever it is just feels relaxed, because it generally turns into a conversation more so than your typical interview.
Yeah.
And the thing that I like about it a lot, you know how many times that and this is how dumb I am. We shouldn't judge a book by its cover.
Mm-hmm.
But
your cover looks smart.
It's tough not to sometimes. Would you agree? Like on the surface of things?
No, I don't. I don't have a lot of prejudice.
No, I try not to do that, but where it's highlighted for me that I find that I do in fact do that on occasion is I will listen to an interview of an actor or some musician or some sports athlete.
Right.
On his show, and going into it, I think, oh, I'm not a big fan of so-and-so. I'm not a big fan of this person. It's probably going to be boring. And then by the end, I'm a fan of that person. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. I'll go look up some of their, music that I already know, but now I want to hear it with a different ear now. Or, somebody's been through some real shit that you didn't know. And you have a little more respect for them because their life wasn't so, clouds and unicorns and candy every day.
Well,
I may have just assumed.
And I was joking, but I'm not saying that I'm holier than thou, and I don't have prejudice. I'm sure I do, but I think I come from an odd situation where I've always dove deep into certain individuals. So like
I do too, but one only has so much time.
Being a musician, you have a lot more time than most people. But no, I think maybe when I was younger, I'd be shocked by, oh, this guy came from here and then he went to here, especially like in the music realm. You take like Jimi Hendrix, for example. Jimi Hendrix was, basically played in like a R&B big band.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you get from that to the Jimi Hendrix experience. What? How does that make any sense? And then you find out, one of his biggest songs was a cover, All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out that he was a huge Bob Dylan fan, and actually the best cover he probably ever did was Like a Rolling Stone. But all I'm saying is I think when you're, especially like when you're in school for music or school for any really focused area, that you really start diving into these, people's background. So maybe that has led me to the idea of what is this guy's full story before going, not so much into that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And also probably the conspiracy theorist in me is probably like, we'll wait to judge this guy. Let's see what he has to say.
Well, a lot of times for me too, it's not so much that I'm like, I don't like this person. It's just I'm not like a huge fan. You know what I mean? Like, or like even an example of somebody that, or a situation where I was kind of a fan was like Fogerty. He had Fogerty on, and I was a fan of CCR. I owned as much as one our age would be, I guess. I owned the Greatest Hits album, which is a really damn good album. It's extensive too. It's like 18 songs, 17 songs. There's a lot of songs on there.
Yeah.
But that was as far as I ever went with like Fogerty or CCR. And he had Fogerty on there who's like 90 years old.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating. But still like a fascinating dude. And like I ended up circling back and listening to all those old songs again, and even watching some other interviews and some things that Fogerty's done on YouTube, because like I said, I thought I was a fan, but after the interview, much more so. You know, it was so cool to hear a guy that, you know, Stern's like, how did you know that you had a hit song? He goes, when I was driving in my car listening to the radio and it came on. And then he went on to explain that in his opinion, hearing a song on the radio in your car is, in his opinion, the way that it's meant to be played, the way that it's meant to be heard. And he has like a huge respect for, and still a strong desire to this day to listen to music in his car.
Yeah.
And,
did you,
and the randomness of the radio.
Did you see him? They did that. I think it was like CBS did that special on Woodstock because it was the anniversary. Did you see him on Fogerty on that?
I did not.
It was really cool because they were huge at the time, and there was such a bad the traffic was so bad, and people were just parking their cars that they couldn't drive through there anymore. So they actually had to take a helicopter in, and I guess like CCR like made like some like kind of jokes about like, we're so big we had to take a helicopter
right
here.
They got a lot of good songs, but
he said like you could only like they played at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and like you could only see the first like couple rows, but he said it wasn't even like that loud. It was almost people who were like just listening, or maybe they're falling asleep, you know. But he wrote one of his big songs, Who Stopped the Rain?
Oh, that's a good one.
And
did we ever figure out, even by the end of the song, who in fact did stop the rain?
No, because what's so interesting about that song is it's about Woodstock. And so when they're talking about Woodstock, he then, you know, sits there with his guitar in a studio, and he plays, you know, he's playing the song, and he says the third verse makes the most sense, and all the words sound like he's talking about Woodstock. But he said, as I'm writing it, I realized it wasn't just about, it was almost like when he was on stage at Woodstock, that he saw what was happening there was a direct reflection of what was happening with his generation within society. And when he, you know, again, okay, maybe I'm a little bit prejudiced, because to me, CCR songs, you know, classic, always in like Vietnam movies and
yeah. Well, they're that time period.
Yeah,
they're super old, like late 60s.
Yeah, and a big part of like
late 60s to early 70s.
Yeah, a big part of Forrest Gump and
yeah.
And I've always thought their songs were a little more simple. But then when when the guy is explaining this connection between what was actually happening at Woodstock and what was happening in society and what they were doing there and what it all meant, you're like, man, this real simple song is really deep. You know. So I guess maybe I was prejudiced in that way. But yeah, it was one of those moments where you hearing a song that I used to play in a older classic rock cover band, and they played a lot of CCR songs, and we'd play that song. And it was almost like hearing it for the first time. Where you're like, oh shit, that's what it's about.
Well, and the other thing too, with like a song like Fortunate Son. Yeah. It's interesting to learn like the dude was drafted and and actually was served at some different forts, and that makes the song mean more, rather than when, you some people might look at that and go, oh, well, this was just some punk kid that didn't want to go fight or didn't have any experience with that, writing about something that they don't truly know about. I will say this, though, and we will move on to some true crime stuff, I promise, but one more thought. Because
it's a true crime. We haven't talked about CCR on the show.
That's
so
right.
That's why we got to it.
This is something you might appreciate, though, and it also goes back to the whole thought that I mentioned about really getting to know somebody through listening to these interviews. Is a friend of mine, Sned, my good buddy Sned, and now one thing that Sned and I do, that's a nickname. Don't anybody out there believe that a mother would name their son Sned.
I'm gonna call him Sned.
He looks like a Sned.
He'll get all the women if we call him Sned.
So my good buddy, one thing that we do together, something that we've shared this, I guess you call it a hobby or whatever, since high school. Okay, since just after high school, is we typically will go see bands that probably aren't. Not probably. They're definitely not popular anymore. They're, on the back end of their career kind of thing.
Right. They're playing the hits.
Yeah. Yeah. We've always done that. We're like, every year, let's go see two bands that the kids aren't listening to. Right.
Right.
And so I said to him, hey, John Fogerty is playing at the Dublin. So in Ohio, in the greater Columbus area, they do a big fireworks display in all the suburbs, and they usually take place on the 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
And the one in Dublin, I don't know if it's called it has some name that they use every year, and I don't know exactly. I don't know if it's 4th of July or the Dublin Festival, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's usually a fairly big to-do. Like, they usually get a band that's like that the kids aren't listening to, but all the old folks are going to know. And so John Fogerty played the 4th of July festival in Dublin, Ohio one year.
Yeah.
Now, the cool thing about that event is they do not charge for the tickets. There's no ticket price.
Yeah.
So it's a free show. And I called him or I texted him a couple months in advance, and I said, hey, good news. John Fogerty's playing at this 4th of July thing in Dublin. It's a free show. Do you want to go? I got to know. I got shut down.
He said, good news. Sounds like a big snooze.
Right. He said, and then
you stop the rain.
Then about, I would say it was less than a year later, because we know 4th of July, we know that date, right? It must have been in April or May of the next year.
Okay.
Fogerty did the interview on Stern, and my buddy calls me the next day and says, who I would really like to see in concert sometime? And I knew who he was. Right. I wanted to, oh man, I knew it, but I was setting it up. I was like, you know what? This is T-ball. I'm going to watch him come up and hit this thing out of the park exactly what I know he's going to say. And I said, oh, who is that? He goes, John Fogerty. And I thought, I would like to. And I said to him, I go, you do realize.
You're a real son of a bitch.
You do realize that less than a year ago, he played here at a free show that I asked you to go to with me. And it wasn't like he had prior engagements or something else to do.
No,
it was no, I don't want to go. Yeah. And after saying all that, I will see Sned this weekend.
Well, we went to see, because we've actually, me, you, and Sned have seen a lot of groups together.
Some old ones.
One of the best
oldies but goodies
experience probably ever. I don't know. Maybe in my top 5 was 311 cruise. We went on the 311 cruise. It was me, you, Sned, and we were. They were taking off, set in sail, and 311 was playing. And I think they started with Down, but I could be wrong. They played
sounds right.
They played something big that was unexpected. Down, or like from Chaos maybe. But anyways, it was one of those when the wind is blowing and you getting goosebumps on you. And I just remember like going, this is crazy. And the people, obviously there's thousands of people that paid a lot of money to be on this cruise, and they were obviously going ape shit.
On the Lido deck.
On the Lido deck, yes.
That was, the Lido deck was very cool.
And it was like, and they were doing the horn because they're setting sail.
What's the awesome guitar player's name? Mahomes?
Yeah, Tim Mahoney.
Yeah, Mahoney. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so wrapped up in football right now. I'm thinking Pat Mahomes is the guitar player for 311. Tim Mahoney, very underrated guitar player. Like for those that don't know, or that haven't checked out 311. And some people, even if you don't like 311, it's hard not to like Mahoney as a guitar player.
Perfect example of not judging a book by its cover. He's just like rock and roll, hard rock guitar player, plays Paul Reed Smith guitars. I didn't know that he, and this was a couple years ago, they were doing an interview, and basically he started like getting stoned, and he fell in love with the Grateful Dead, and he would just sit around his guitar, his apartment playing Grateful Dead songs. And because Grateful Dead songs are structured in such a way that you could improvise with them, so you're almost just like playing in the band. It's not like AC/DC where you have to play all the parts correctly for it to sound pretty good. You can kind of improvise while you play along, and that's kind of how he got so deep into music and so deep into guitar playing.
Well, then I'll circle back to judging a book by its cover. It seems to me like he's the most quote-unquote rock and roll guy in that group. You think?
Yeah, I don't know.
I
don't think so, because he's kind of a hippie.
Maybe not, but he just seems to kind of ooze coolness. Like,
yeah, but it's like a hippie cool.
Yeah, you're right.
You know
it's not so strong rock and roll. It's just kind of he's just a different dude than the rest of us.
Yeah, everybody's going to be like, "Oh, when we talk about some true crime." Hey, we talk about this is how the garage started. We always had kind of mainly two subjects, music and then crime.
Music.
I mean, we talk about sports some, but we never were much into like debating sports. It's kind of like, what do you think of this? Okay, value your opinion, and that's it.
Nolan Ryan is the greatest pitcher of all time.
Yeah, we've never done that. But we've kind of done that with music, but not aggressively, but we'll sit there.
Yeah, because that's that's more of a fun debate, because you and I have we like similar stuff, but not, I wouldn't say spot on.
No,
but the thing that makes it fun to talk with you about it is that while we may disagree, we respect the other's opinion, and we're kind of like, if you say so-and-so is the greatest guitar player, so-and-so is this, and this band is this, the other one goes, I can see why you think that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
We had a really great debate that one time on who was the greatest guitar player that was in a band. Like that didn't seem like a solo act. Yeah.
Right? Like the band wasn't named after the guitar player.
Yeah, like Van Halen doesn't count. Because that's just like,
by naming the band Van Halen, you've taken yourself out of the running.
Yeah, but also like his role doesn't sit there with like I would almost say that Eddie's more known for some of his crazy solos than he is like his awesome riffs.
Mm-hmm.
Where like,
or both.
Like AC/DC has, I would think, more awesome riffs than solos.
Edward Van Halen is the greatest keyboard player guitar guy
of all time.
I love what he's like. All right, I'm not only am I going to do the guitar, but from now on, the keyboards are mine too.
Well, I love, what is his name? Mark Chapman. Have you met him? Ever heard of him? Guitar player.
When you said Chapman, I was thinking of the guy that shot Lennon.
Mark Chapman. I think that's his name. Let me look it up real quick. Mark.
Have you met Mark Chapman? I don't want to.
Guitar. Let me just look this up. I think, yeah, Mark Chapman. He's, I think there's if I'm correct, I could be wrong.
The words from the pages turned into blood, dripped down the pages and seeped into my veins.
Well, okay, so the problem with...
What is that, chapter 27 or something?
Okay,
Mark David Chapman?
I think I'm right. But anyways, there was a guitar player that was originally from Columbus that played on all the Van Halen tours.
Oh, he's like the guy that you see in the back standing.
No. What was so interesting about the Van Halen tours was he was never on stage.
Oh, they didn't even let him on stage.
He played guitar and keyboards. So when and this is smart. I mean, like, you could have had a guy on stage if you wanted to.
So when Eddie's playing keyboard, he's behind the scenes playing the guitar, and then when he's playing guitar, he's behind the scenes playing keyboard.
Right. So instead of having backing tracks.
Yeah.
Right. And he would play, but it's funny to me because I'm just going to say, I think Eddie Van Halen is a douchebag, and I think he's so
I second that opinion.
I think he's so douchey that,
but I love him. Don't you?
I love his guitar playing.
I love his guitar playing. I love
but just because
the band Van Halen, but he's
right, but just because
I would like to slap Edward Van Halen in the face.
Oh, my favorite is when he says, then I said to David Lee Roth, I said, if you say that to me again, you better be wearing a cup. That's one of the biggest pussy lines I've ever heard in my life.
Because I'm a guy that likes to kick people in the junk.
Yeah. I mean, you know this. I mean, because you got me to the... There's that breaking point where you start saying stupid shit, where the guys... You get so angry that the guy starts going, "Oh, fuck you," and the other guy goes, "Oh no, fuck you."
We've all been there.
And my favorite is
most of us.
Adam Carolla always talks about is when it gets to the point where it gets very sexual. Oh yeah, I'm gonna fuck you up. Yeah, I'm gonna fuck you.
Oh yeah, when they start,
I'm gonna fuck you hard, and you're like, what?
Right. When it gets weird.
I thought you were just gonna fight. When Carolla does that, it's just. But yeah, who says that? And then I told David Lee Roth that next time you say that to me, you better be wearing a cup.
And they've done a couple tours together recently, and now it's Sammy Hagar that Eddie and Alex refused to make amends with.
No, interesting thing. I just heard this the other day. So David Lee Roth was doing like a long form interview. He did one with Joe Rogan and some other people. I think promoting like he does some stuff with Sirius. David Lee Roth does like where he actually picks the songs. Like actually he's a DJ.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was a DJ at what was that, Kiss FM in LA for some time?
Oh yeah. But what was cool about the interview was they were saying, "Oh, this stuff is going to get back to his bandmates." He basically said, "Look, we don't hang out together. We have a hard time getting along on the road. We're not really friends."
Right.
But he was also saying like, look, it's undeniable once we go on stage and do our thing, it's undeniable. So it was funny because all these people were going, this is going to get back to the Van Halens. You think the Van Halens care? They're multi-millionaires. They don't need to go on tour.
I don't even think they're listening.
No,
to whatever that was. Him and his brother, they sit in the garage and they play a concert every day for themselves.
They probably don't actually do that.
Right. That's the joke. That's the running joke for the last.
And in fairness to Eddie, and this is true, in fairness to him, and I had this on a way smaller level than Van Halen, but in fairness to Eddie, you've seen throughout history, they used to call Eric Clapton God. They would actually, spray paint that all over London when Clapton came out. And then Hendrix came out, and then he was God. And you've seen this with Stevie Ray Vaughan and whoever. And Van Halen had that thing. He did some stuff that nobody else did.
Mm-hmm.
FYI, he didn't create tapping. Tapping was created long before Eddie Van Halen, but he gets credit for it. And when you are seen in some people's eyes as the greatest guitar player in the world, it can do a couple things. You can either meet the challenge head on and keep trying to progress, or block out all the noise and just kind of keep doing what you're doing and create good music and worry about that. Or what a lot of people do is they protect it by doing less. Because if you already did something that, it's like Michael Jordan playing with the Bulls. You win 3 times in a row, you come back, you win 3 times in a row. You don't need to go to the Wizards. You could just hang it up forever and sit on the fact that you might be the greatest of all time. And they can always argue that point. You can look at so many Van Halen records and so many Van Halen solos, not just with Van Halen, but with Michael Jackson, and argue that Eddie Van Halen is one of the greatest guitar players of all time. And I think that's a very heavy weight to have on you. And I think it has made him want to do less, if that makes any sense. Like the less I do, the less I can be criticized for. But I already have enough stuff in the spectrum of rock legends that, hey, there's my argument. I'm not going to make any more arguments. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, he also beat cancer. That takes up some of your time as well.
Well, he said to cancer, if you want to give me cancer again, next time, you better be wearing a cup.